I want to take you to a short trip how these things are being treated. Okay? For instance, one very common technique is train, keep training. Yoga loves discipline. And in a way, many teachers think that if the person will train, will practice, it will be sort of cured. It will be okay. I had problems myself. I trained a lot, and here, look. Okay? But training is not enough. And in a way, if we do what we call more of the same mistake, what we see is that the brain has its own ways. And if there is a limitation in the body, something goes wrong, and I tell the person, now practice. The brain takes the movement to the place where it's easy for him. This is what we call a chain reaction. The easier way to understand it is that if there is a limitation in a specific place in your body and you force a movement, the brain will take the movement to a different place. For instance, if I take two people sitting in a Dandasana position, okay? Sitting with straight legs. One person sits like this, the other one near him sits like this. Can you see the differences? Now this person here has shortening in the hamstrings muscles. The hamstring muscles pull the pelvic backwards, which makes his spine rounded. If I will now go from this position to a Paschimottanasana, bend forward, this person will go forward in an integrative way, and each segment in his body will devote his own small movement to the whole movement. Understood? If I'll take this person into a Paschimottanasana, he will go this way. Why? Because the brain will take the movement, instead of to the hip joints using the hamstrings, he will take it, or most of it, to the lower back. So if this person will now practice on his Paschimottanasana every day for half an hour, he will harm his back. You will understand it better tomorrow afternoon. We'll talk about the intervertebral disc in the positions of forward bending. Okay? So this idea is important to understand, and I will show you a few common chain reactions just to get a feeling of the complexity of the kinesiology of the body. For instance, sitting with crossed legs. This is a very common yoga posture. Okay, if you ask children in the street, what is yoga? So right away they will say, like this, crossed leg position. Now, in order to sit like this in a proper way, I will show you. Now, have a look at this. In order to sit in a crossed-legged position in a proper way, you need to keep your lower back in a little curved position, okay? What I want to show you here is the connection between the hip joints and what's happening upwards. If there is a limitation in the hip joints, you will see some very common chain reactions going on. Now, the hip joints need to be laterally rotated in this position. You understand that? In order to be able to sit like that in a proper way, the hip joints should be 90 degrees laterally rotated. What is the common lateral rotation range of motion in a normal position, normal person, you know? How? 45. 45, that means that if I'm lack of range of motion of lateral rotation of the hip joint, have a look what will happen. While the pelvis is anteriorly tilted, we can keep it like that. But if there is a restriction in the thigh, the first thing that will happen is that the knees will come up. Okay? As the knees come upwards, and they're higher than the hip joints, end of story, guys. Don't do that. Because listen what happened now. Chain reactions will come up all the way upwards. The pelvis cannot anymore be tilted forward. Now it will be tilted backwards, posterior tilt. This will erase the lordotic curve, will get it into a convex position, and will slowly come all the way up and force this person to sit in a kyphotic position. So actually what you see here is a common chain reactions which starts in the hip joint limitation and affects a kyphotic spine that was not there before. We created it. And as a yoga teacher, what is the first thing I would ask this person to do? Breathe deeply. Okay, let's feel it in our body. What will happen now in this position? So, as you sit, cross-legged position, try now to lift your knees, round your back, release your chin on your chest. And close your eyes and try to breathe now deeply. Try to breathe to your chest. Try to breathe in three-dimensional way to the back of your chest. I can talk until tomorrow. What you will see here is the main thing that we work on, maybe the most important thing in yoga, which is the breathing process, breathing patterns, will be affected in this example due to limitation in the hip. This is one of the nicest sentences Swami Venkatasananda used to say. One of the nicest, the only one I know. But he said, if you breathe 50%, you live 50%. It doesn't mean, thank God, that our trainee will die at the age of 40 or 50 instead of 100, but it will affect the energy. It will affect the way he moves, cardiovascular abilities. And in fact, if we look at the breathing process and think about this position that you just stayed in, a kyphotic position, we'll talk about it in a deeper way later, you'll see that everything I touch here will affect the breathing. Every muscle, every joint that is limited there will affect the quality of breathing. Here we see the pectoralis minor. It doesn't matter where I look. Here I see the intercostal muscles. Here I see, if I take it down to many areas of the backwards, and if I go maybe to the joints that are from the back, joints that we will study about, learn about tomorrow, the costovertebral joints, joints between the vertebrae and the ribs. Everything is affected there in a kyphotic position. So what I want to now is not to teach anything, just to explain what is the meaning of chain reaction. And in every position in yoga that you face a limitation, doesn't matter where, the brain will take the movement to different places. Is this clear?
The question, I don't know if this is the right time, but I have a couple of students that I've talked to about this, and I prop them up and try to get them a little bit more open and ask them, do you find a difference in your breathing? And they say, yes, this is so much harder to breathe when they're sitting more up, because they're just used to this pose. So that would be their brain telling them that this is the right way, even though...
This is very interesting point. I will not talk about it too much now because we will talk about breathing patterns in the last day, connected to core stability. But in order to breathe in a proper way, you need movement. You have limitation of movement in a kyphotic position, and you have limitation of movement in a soldier position. Give it a try until you, as you feel it in your body, you understand it better. So just straight on, straight up. Try to extend your spine, get your hands backwards and your chest as much forward as you can. Try to open up to the maximum. And now try to breathe deeply to your chest. What do you feel? You feel limitation. And in therapy, we have to take this into an account because I had quite many experiences with asthmatic children who sometimes develop their own kyphotic position in order to make the breathing easier. If I will force them to stand, Tadasana, very straight, I harm the way they breathe. What is more important? Something to think about. I will not develop it now, but it's a good point. Okay? So the correction from this position is not this position. We also always have to find a balance. And the next session we'll do today, the workshop will work on this balance. Stira Sukham in yoga. This is the art of yoga. There's more art in it than science. Stiram Sukham, something all of us look for, this balance. And sometimes there are very precious moments we find it. Okay? By the way, I know in the States it's also very popular on our football sessions. Do you know what is the most important thing when you come to a football session? Come on time. Don't come late to this session, because everyone comes and, find themselves the right ball, the right football, fits their needs and height and everything. If I come to a football session and all left is something like a small, tiny little inflated ball like this, and I'm sitting now on this ball, in this position, I prefer to give it up. Okay? To do something else. So what we actually need is to take into an account that position that I was talking about in a position in which the knees are higher than the hips. And in a way, I can give you that as a tip. In every sitting position, try to make the knees a bit lower than hip level. And this is what we call in yoga adaptations. If I am the teacher now in this position and I see these all chain reactions that happened, I know that there is a problem now here with the hip joints. First of all, adaptation. Sit on something. And if it's not enough in order to gain this position, better position of the spine, I want to open up this angle between the hips, the thighs, and the pelvis. I will let this person sit on a higher, maybe bolster or something else, in order to gain this opened up angle. Have I treated the problem? Have I solved the problem? No, the problem is there. In yoga therapy, we don't fix people. We don't always fix problems. We want to let them enjoy yoga and practice high level of yoga without harming themselves. So the adaptation, which is based on the work of Desi Kashar, who is maybe, I think, one of the first teachers, big teachers, from the Krishnamacharya family, who adapted the traditional yoga to the needs of the Western community. And if we stick to the tradition, sometimes we get more harm than good. Okay? So adaptations is the main tool for us as yoga teachers to adapt our yoga to the needs of our students and ourselves. And by the way, it's legal. You can be a good teacher, even if you sit on a bench. It's okay. I know that it sounds funny, but many teachers are ashamed to sit with adaptations or something because they're supposed to sit in a full, lotus position, no problem. I would suggest that even if you can sit in a full lotus position, digging your knees down to the floor, sit on a bench, just to let your students feel better while they do so. Okay, sometimes they look at you, they want to be like you. This is something I always put in the first lecture because using power, strength, what we call manual help, is something that sometimes solve one problem and make new ones. And one of the most dangerous things to do in yoga is this kind of things. I recently accepted one patient, very well-trained yoga teacher, who damaged badly his lower back in such a way because his teacher was not happy enough with the way he bent forward. So he was, doing some kind of manipulations. And I always think that sometimes we need to remember that yoga in itself, in its origin, is therapy. We don't have to say yoga therapy. Yoga is a therapy. It is meant good. And there are so many injuries now, these days, that maybe one of the reasons I was willing to come maybe 10,000 miles or so to talk about these things. Because we see it a lot. If you're in a Paschimottanasana here, you struggle with your posture, no problem, here I am. Come on, push yourself forward. But what will happen now if my help, my manual help, is not directed to the right place? Again, to the lower back. Okay? I'm not against this as long as the teacher knows how to help, how to adapt his physical help in a proper way. And it's very common, very, I would say, human, to try to fix our students. They have problems, we want to fix them. But we have to understand that not everything can be fixed. How many people here tried to work on a specific problem in one of the asanas for a long time, again and again and again, and nothing happens? Raise your hands. I raise mine too. So if you try something and it doesn't really help, a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, month, sometimes years, ask yourself why it doesn't help you. Maybe there is some structural problem in your body that doesn't allow your body to do something. It's okay. You have to understand that. Because not everything can be fixed. We have to live with this peacefully. Okay? And this is an introduction lecture, I will talk about all these things. Once we start dealing with postural problems, we will see that there are functional problems that can be sort of fixed, okay? Good prognosis. And there are some structural problems that we have to accept. Acceptance is the most important thing. Try. Give it a try.
I have a share.
Okay.
The studio that I run as the director, and I'm also an ergonomics professional, we banned the word adjustments from our staff. Our studio is within a chiropractic facility. So the chiropractor was like, hey, don't go telling people you're giving adjustments. And I thought about this. And what happened was when we banned the word, it naturally banned the force of the movement. So instead of saying adjustments, we say the word enhancement. And instead of a forceful action, it's usually more like a sweeping of the hand. The teachers just naturally started to do that. And I just thought that was incredibly interesting, that a population of teachers that came from all different training, just by tweaking the word, changed the practice. So I just wanted to share that, so sorry.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a good point. Sometimes changing a letter. In general, I believe that small changes make the big difference. Small changes. Sometimes small touch. You'll see in a few moments. We'll do some things like this. Very small signs of touch. Not forcing touch. Sometimes make the most important differences.